The first thing I saw that morning was twisted metal where my truck used to be, and in that moment something inside me went completely still, not angry yet, not scared, just very clear because I knew whoever had done this thought they were finally taking control of me, and they had no idea how badly they had miscalculated. My name is Ryan Calder, and for 9 years, I had lived on a quiet stretch of mountain land just outside a place called Elk Ridge, Colorado, the kind of town where everyone waves even if they do not like you, and where winters are not something you survive, they're something you prepare for like a war. I had bought my property because of where it sat, right at the bend where the county highway turned into the private road that led up into the Elk Ridge Estates development, a neat little cluster of 40-something upscale homes governed by one of those homeowners associations that loved rules more than they loved people. My land had something special attached to it, a legal easement that went back more than 20 years, long before Elk Ridge Estates even existed, giving me the right to operate commercial vehicles on my driveway and along the access road that crossed my property. I did not buy the place by accident. I checked with 2 attorneys before I signed anything, because I ran a snow removal business and I needed that access. I needed to be able to park my plow truck without someone in a polo shirt telling me I was ruining their view. That truck was my livelihood, a heavy-duty diesel pickup with a custom plow, a machine built to chew through mountain snow like it was nothing, and that morning it looked like it had been attacked by someone who really wanted it dead. The blade was bent in on itself. Both front tires were slashed clean through. The engine block was smashed, and every single window had been shattered, hydraulic fluid and oil bleeding out across my concrete in these ugly rainbow streaks that made my stomach turn. This was not some drunk kid with a baseball bat. This was deliberate. I stood there in the cold for a long time, just staring at it, feeling that hollow buzzing in my chest that comes when something important to you has been taken in a way that feels personal, and eventually I pulled out my phone and called the county sheriff. While I waited, I walked slow circles around the wreckage, taking photos, every dent, every scrape, every footprint in the snow, because when you live in the mountains, you learn to document things, whether animals, people, it all disappears if you do not. Deputy Harris showed up about half an hour later, a stocky guy with tired eyes who had probably already been dealing with accidents from the first big snow of the season, and when he saw my truck, he let out a low whistle and just shook his head. Someone really wanted this thing gone, he said quietly. I told him everything about the HOA notices I've been getting for months, the fines they kept trying to hit me with for parking a commercial vehicle on my own property, the letters from their president, Lorraine Beckett, and the way she had stared me down at a community meeting the week before and said, one way or another that eyesore is not going to be here much longer. I even handed Harris a flash drive with the audio recording from that meeting because their bylaws required all meetings to be recorded, and I had a copy, and I watched his eyebrows rise just a little when he listened to that part. That could be important, he said, in a way that made me think he already knew it was. While he was finishing up his report, I felt something else starting to click into place, something I had not thought about at first, because I had been too busy staring at my ruined truck. And that was the simple fact that Elk Ridge Estates did not plow its own roads. I did. 4-6 winters straight, my company had been the one keeping those winding mountain streets open, because no one else wanted the job, too steep, too narrow, too much liability, and because I lived right there at the entrance, it was easy for me to roll out before dawn and clear everything before people even woke up. And now my truck was dead. I called Lorraine while Harris was still in my driveway, mostly because I wanted to hear her voice, to hear if there was even a hint of guilt in it. She answered with that overly sweet tone she always used, the one that made you feel like she was smiling while she sharpened a knife behind her back. Ryan, what a surprise, she said. Someone destroyed my plow truck last night. I told her flatly, the sheriff is investigating it as a felony, which means I will not be able to plow for Elk Ridge this week, or probably this entire storm cycle, so you might want to find someone else. There was a pause, just long enough to be interesting. Are you implying the association had something to do with that? She asked. I am not implying anything, I said. I am telling you what happened. My equipment was criminally destroyed, and there's a blizzard coming in 48 hours. That is just reality. You are contractually obligated. She snapped, suddenly dropping the fake sweetness. You cannot just walk away because of some inconvenience. Section 12, Force Majeure. Lorraine, I replied, equipment failure due to criminal activity is specifically listed. I suggest you read your own contract." When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not with fear, but with this strange mix of anger and something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. Because for the first time, I realized that the people who thought they were hurting me had actually handed me leverage they could not undo. 2 days later, the snow started falling. Big, thick flakes drifting straight down at first, then sideways as the wind picked up, and by the time the sun came up, Elk Ridge Estates was buried under nearly 2 feet of snow with more coming. Their roads completely impassable, their driveways invisible, their perfect little mountain paradise suddenly very cut off from the rest of the world. My phone started ringing before I even finished my coffee. I did not answer. By the time the sun was fully up that morning, my phone looked like it was having a nervous breakdown. Missed calls stacked on top of missed calls. Text messages piling up in that desperate way people type when they realize the world is not going to bend for them, just because they're uncomfortable. And I let it all sit there while I made myself eggs and toast and watched the snow drift sideways past my kitchen window like it was being poured out of the sky. I had planned for winters like this. Heated driveway, backup generator, enough food to last months if I had to, because when you live where I do, you either respect the mountains or they teach you respect the hard way. Elk Ridge, for all its big houses and manicured driveways, had never really understood that. They thought money made them immune to weather, and now they were learning differently. Around 10:30, there was a sharp pounding at my door. Not a polite knock, but the kind of urgent, irritated banging that tells you the person on the other side is used to being obeyed. I already knew who it was before I looked. Lorraine Beckett stood there in a long designer coat that was already speckled with snow, her cheeks red, her eyes sharp and furious in a way she probably thought was intimidating. "You need to plow the roads," she said the second I opened the door. Not hello, not how are you, just an order. "Good morning to you too, Lorraine," I replied, leaning against the doorframe. "Did you find another company?" "You're the one under contract," she shot back. "People are stuck, there are medical appointments, kids need to get to school. This is unacceptable." "So, who's destroying my truck?" I said quietly, and that made her flinch just a little. "That is ridiculous," she snapped. "You have no proof of anything." "The sheriff seems pretty interested," I told her, "but we can talk about that later. Right now the question is how much those other companies quoted you." Her lips pressed together, and she hesitated, which was answer enough, but I waited. $5,000 for one plow, she finally admitted, and another $3,000 if we wanted to stay on call through the day. I let out a low whistle. "That is steep," I said. "That is why you need to honor your contract," she shot back. "I do not have a truck, Lorraine," I said again, the same words I had already told her twice. "You cannot plow snow with good intentions." For a second, she just stared at me. Then something ugly twisted in her expression. "You did this on purpose," she said. "You wrecked your own truck so you could extort the community." That was a serious accusation, and we both knew it. I leaned a little closer. "If you are accusing me of insurance fraud and filing a false police report, you better be ready to say that to Deputy Harris," I said, "because he is the one running the investigation into who smashed my engine block with a sledgehammer." She opened her mouth, then closed it. And for the first time since I had known her, she did not have a snappy reply ready. "I am not holding anyone hostage," I added. "I am sitting in my house on my own land, minding my own business. Your residents can walk down my easement to the highway anytime they want, but snow removal is a separate service, and I physically cannot provide it." She turned and stomped back to her SUV without another word, spun her tires halfway down my driveway, and disappeared back into the white curtain of falling snow. And something told me this was far from over. It was not even noon when the next visitor showed up, this time on a snowmobile that bogged down in the powder right at my property line. The rider struggling through knee-deep snow toward my door, looking like a man who had already regretted every decision he had made that morning. His name was Thomas Greer, vice president of the HOA, a former corporate guy who had moved to the mountains thinking it would be peaceful, and now he stood on my tile floor, dripping snow in frustration. "Ryan, thank God," he said. "We need your help. People are panicking up there." I poured him a cup of coffee and let him warm his hands on it before I spoke. "You do not need to tell me," I said, "but I do not have a truck. Lorraine thinks you are doing this to teach her a lesson," he said carefully. "Lorraine thinks a lot of things," I replied, "but let me ask you something. Thomas, did you know there was a discussion about dealing with my truck at an executive board meeting?" His eyes dropped for just a second, and that was all the answer I needed. She was furious about it. He admitted she kept saying you were lowering property values, that you were disrespecting the community. I thought she was just venting. Who else was in that meeting? I asked. The whole board, he said quietly. And nobody shut her down, I said. We did not think she would actually do anything illegal, he replied, his voice small. Well, someone did, I said, and now I'm out $40,000 and you have 40 families trapped in a snow globe. So let us talk solutions. I told him the truth. Renting a truck and plow capable of handling those roads would cost around $1,500 a day, plus fuel and labor, about $2,000 a day total, and this storm was going to take at least 3 days to clear properly. $6,000 up front, I said, no credit. That is extortion, Thomas said weakly. That is the market during a blizzard, I replied, and honestly, it is a bargain considering what your board just cost me. He left without agreeing to anything, trudging back through the snow like a man carrying a very heavy problem on his back, and I watched the flakes fill in his footprints as if he had never been there at all. The storm raged through the night, wind howling around the house, snow piling up in drifts taller than my fence. And when I woke up the next morning, the world was silent and white, and my phone was finally quiet too, like even the people up the mountain had run out of energy to beg. At 8:32, sheriff vehicles pulled into my driveway. Deputy Harris and a detective I had never met before stepping out with that look cops get when they are about to tell you something you already know. We executed a search warrant at Lorraine Beckett's house this morning. The detective said her name was Alvarez, and we found a sledgehammer with paint matching her truck, crowbars, bolt cutters, and text messages coordinating the whole thing. I felt my shoulders sag in a way I had not even realized they were tense. She did not do it alone. Alvarez continued. One of the board members, Melissa Quinn, was with her. We arrested them both. Charges include felony criminal mischief, conspiracy, and trespassing. So it really was them, I said. Harris nodded. It is going to get ugly for that HOA, he added. After they left, I sat there for a long time, just staring at the snow, feeling vindicated and exhausted at the same time. And then my phone rang again, this time with a number I did not recognize. Ryan called her. A man said smoothly, "This is Victor Quinn, attorney for the Elk Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. What is left of the board anyway?" I figured that call was coming, I said. "We would like to resolve this situation as quickly and cleanly as possible," he said. "The board is prepared to compensate you for the destruction of your vehicle and cover all emergency snow removal costs, if you are willing to continue providing services and refrain from suing the association itself." "How much for the truck?" I asked. $42,000 based on fair market value, he replied without hesitation. "And emergency work?" I pressed. $6,000 for the next 3 days, rental costs covered at your rate plus 15%, he said. I thought about it, about the neighbors who had nothing to do with this mess, about the board members who had let it happen anyway, and about the way holding on to anger can rot you from the inside if you're not careful. "I want all in writing," I said finally, including a formal acknowledgement that my easement allows commercial vehicles, and I want the $6,000 before I start. "You will have it by the end of the day," he said. When I hung up, I made one more call to an equipment yard down in Silver Creek that I knew kept old plow trucks for emergencies, and after a lot of pleading and a promise of good money, they agreed to hold one for me until morning. The storm had changed everything, not because of the snow, but because it had finally forced everyone to face the truth they had been avoiding, that power built on intimidation only lasts until someone stops being afraid. And up on that mountain, fear was starting to melt. The agreement hit my inbox that afternoon while the wind was still rattling my windows, a long, dry document full of legal language that boiled down to one simple truth. The Elk Ridge Board knew they were in deep trouble, and they were trying to get out of it with their wallets instead of their pride. And honestly, I could live with that as long as it meant I got back what had been taken from me. I read every line twice, made a few changes, sent it back, and by 7 that evening it was signed and $6,000 showed up in my business account, which felt surreal considering less than 3 days earlier I had been standing in my driveway, staring at what looked like a crime scene instead of a truck. The next morning I drove down to Silver Creek before the sun was fully up, picked up a battered 3/4-ton pickup with a plow that had seen better days, and pointed it back toward Elk Ridge, the highway already cleared by county crews, the world slowly digging itself out of the storm. When I turned onto the private road, the scale of the mess really hit me. Drifts stacked up like frozen waves, cars buried almost to their windows, driveways that no longer existed, and I started working without thinking about it. Muscle memory and focus taking over, the engine growling, the blade pushing back against the weight of the mountain. It took 3 days. 3 long, cold days of 12-hour shifts, fuel stops, sore hands, and fogged-up windows. And as much as part of me wanted to stay angry, it was hard not to soften when people came out of their houses bringing me coffee and sandwiches, thanking me like I had pulled them out of a burning building instead of just doing my job. Most of them apologized too, quietly, awkwardly, as if they were embarrassed by what their board had done. And I realized something important during those hours behind the wheel, that communities are not the same as the people who claim to speak for them. Lorraine and Melissa were arraigned a week later, both pleading not guilty in a way that felt almost insulting given the evidence. But that was their problem now, not mine, and by then I had already ordered a new truck, a bigger one, better than the old, because if life is going to knock something down, you might as well build it back stronger. The check from the HOA came right on time 30 days later, $42,000 exactly, and my insurance paid out shortly after that. And for the first time in weeks, I slept without waking up at 3 in the morning, replaying every conversation in my head. Elk Ridge changed too. Thomas Greer stepped in as acting president, and one of the first things the new board did was rescind every violation notice they had ever sent me and amend their covenants to explicitly recognize pre-existing easements, a quiet admission that Lorraine D never been right to begin with. A month after everything blew up, Melissa Quinn called me from a number I almost did not answer, her voice shaking, telling me she was going to take a plea deal, probation, and restitution, and that she was sorry, that she had let herself get dragged into Lorraine's obsession with control. I did not forgive her exactly, but I did not scream either, because what would that have changed? And when she hung up, I realized that the anger I had been carrying was starting to lose its grip. Lorraine went to trial in the spring and lost. 18 months in county jail and a pile of fines that would probably follow her for years. And when I saw her being let out of the courtroom on the news, I did not feel triumphant, just sad, because she had burned down her own life over a parking dispute, which is the kind of thing you would laugh at if it were not so tragic. Business took off after that winter. Word travels fast in mountain towns, and suddenly I was the guy who stood up to an HOA and won. The guy who still showed up and did the work even after being treated like an enemy. And new contracts started rolling in from other communities that had heard my story and wanted someone they could trust. I hired my first full-time employee that summer, a young kid named Ethan who loved engines and hated office politics. And one afternoon while we were servicing the trucks, he asked me if it had been hard not to get revenge. I told him honestly, but revenge is like a fire. It feels warm at first, and then it just burns everything down, including you. In September, I got an invitation to speak at a regional HOA conference, of all things, about contractor relations and easement rights. And standing in front of a room full of board members telling them exactly what had happened, watching them shift in their seats as they realized how badly things could go if they let ego run the show, felt strangely satisfying. By the time winter rolled around again, Elk Ridge had a new president, a retired teacher named Margaret Hale, who sent me a handwritten thank you card after the first big storm along with a bonus check for reliability. And I kept that card in a drawer with Melissa's apology letter as a reminder that people can mess up and still try to do better. On the anniversary of the night my truck was destroyed, I stood on my porch watching fresh snow fall on the new one, parked right where the old had been, and I thought about how weird it was that something so ugly had turned into something that had actually made my life better. Maybe that is how it always works. Maybe you do not get to choose what hits you, but you do get to choose what you build out of the wreckage. So here's the part one I'm curious about, and this is where I want to hear from you, because everyone who hears this story seems to have a different take. Was I right to stand my ground and let the HOA deal with the consequences of their own actions, even when it meant an entire community was temporarily stuck, or should I have swallowed my anger and helped them anyway, because innocent people were affected? Where do you draw that line between justice and compassion, between holding someone accountable and becoming part of the harm? Let me know what you think down in the comments, because honestly, I still think about that sometimes when the snow starts to fall again and the world goes quiet, and I would love to know where you land.